It's like getting caught with your pants down, I feel. So what we're doing today is we are going to do a rundown of our latest single in Ardour. And as you can see, we're running a little bit behind for a couple of reasons. So I'm just going to kind of get started here and bring all this up. Fun fact, I do pretty much everything in Linux. Big fan of, open source and all that good stuff. So that's how I roll. And of course my cell phone is going off. I'm going to ignore that. I'm just going to shove it in my pocket. Yeah, so here it is. Another fun thing about Linux for those that don't know is we've got this neat little utility called Jack, and this is like a really powerful like audio backend, and I can connect pretty much anything I want to anything else that I want. And so what I'm kind of looking at here is all of the Ardour channels. Also have a Jack input client that's going to OBS, and so I'm just going to take the master out of Jack, or out of Ardour, that's our digital audio workstation, and I'm going to connect it to our Jack input client. And so that way, if I start playing some music, we should hear it in the live stream. Otherwise it wouldn't. I'm getting confused. All right, shall we listen? By the way, this is live on all the streaming platforms. Just in case, you haven't already listened to it.
You don't like me, I don't like you. Why do you treat me like I'm dumb? We both have private school degrees, but we're oil and water, you and me. You try so hard to be number one. What if I told you you can have it? What if I told you I don't care? You can be the favorite, I can be second best. You can be the prima donna of this show. Oh, you can be the winner of Employee of the Month. I've got other avenues to glow. I saw you roll your eyes at me. It's time for me to spill the tea. Regina George only got so far. I do my work 'cause I'm no snitch. Even when you're
Sorry, I
acting
gotta
like a
be,
total
really go
bitch,
into it.
all you want is praise and gold stars. What if I told you you can have them? I don't need to be the teacher's pet. You can be the favorite, I can be second best. You can be the prima donna of the show. Oh, you can be the winner of Employee of the Month. I've got other avenues to glow.
So the drums haven't stopped, but we're going to do a bass solo anyways. That's how we do it, right?
What if I handed you the trophy? Just a piece of plastic anyway. You can be the favorite, I can be second best.
I just want to say, I'm really happy with this guitar solo. I'm really proud of Celeste for, that down. It came out really well.
You can be the winner. I've got other avenues to glow.
So I guess we could take a minute now just to maybe talk about gear for a second. I mean, it's natural. It's a part of the deal. I know not all of us are gearheads, but I guess I'll start out just by pointing out this little secret weapon. This is a ribbon mic, handmade. It doesn't even really have a name. Like, it's not a name or a model number, but I found these on Reverb. They're made by a guy in Tula, Russia. All the parts are either new old stock from the Soviet era or Russian, and it sounds fantastic. I would say probably would hold its own against like a Warrior R21, I can't remember. But that is the secret weapon of this track, and a lot of we've got a few other projects in the works at the moment, and yeah, that's pretty heavily involved. And because it's it's a passive ribbon mic, it's got a nice warm sound. It also is really, really low output. I'm just going to take a moment. Hopefully I don't screw this camera up too much. So just for preampage, we're rolling through JHS color box, and then that's going into a 1176 style compressor. Yeah, and that's the crux of how most of this is recorded. The guitars were recorded like that. The vocals were recorded like that. Drums there was kind of a funny hodgepodge way of recording the drums, and it's probably maybe the first thing we'll look at, because yeah, it's kind of fun and or funny how we got around to doing that. They were recorded in this room. This is a really small room, but I think we've done a halfway decent job of treating it. And there's just 5 mics on the drums, 2 of which were built into like a Zoom audio recorder, and that was being used as the audio interface. The bass drum just uses like an SM57. You really don't need, I mean, yeah, those bass drum eggs, they do serve a purpose. I don't want to poo-poo them, but I actually find that I'm pretty happy with an SM57 for recording bass drum and acoustic bass. By acoustic bass, I mean the upright bass, a real bass, not a toy bass, or the slab, some people call it. But the song has a slab on it, the electric bass, excuse me, and that's being recorded, again, with the JHS color box 1176 style compressor. Yeah, so there's a lot of that in this song, and a lot of the other things that we're working on right now. So let's, I said we were going to look at the drums, so I'm just going to take a moment to just kind of solo these out and kind of let's take a look at like the first verse. First thing you might notice, no bass drum on beat 1. And I did actually, when we first recorded this, there is bass drum on, 1 and 3. And what I kind of decided was, I like it with a little bit more lilt that happens, when you take the bass drum away from just beat 1, basically. So this is kind of like how samba players would traditionally play, like at a really high tempo. And then, yeah, bass drum comes back in 1 and 3 for, the choruses. And, it just it does help drive it along. What I'll add to that, since we just passed over 1, some of the fills, and this is kind of my bad, and this is where problem solving comes in. If I just solo out the ribbon mic. This was kind of set like in the middle of the rack toms, kind of pointed at the snare. So the cymbals were kind of in the dead zone if you're familiar with how ribbon mics work. So if I just solo out this guy and we hear what happens, oh, and it blows up. It was clipping the snot out of the preamp, and then the compressor was gating. It's actually a really fun character, and I love that that's in there. But it's also problematic. So what I kind of did is I just pulled down the level of that pretty significantly, and then the two built-in mics on the Zoom recorder that we were using for an audio interface when we were doing the drums, those are basically being used as room mics. So I just kind of brought up the rooms for that fill, and there's a couple other that I did that for. And just listen how good these rooms sound. You could just about use that on its own, almost. Not quite. I do love the character of having that ribbon mic in there that's just super lo-fi, very warm, but yeah. The other thing I'll kind of comment about that, because we didn't use a snare mic, which is a little bit unconventional. So what I did on that particular track, brought up a little bit of 3K on the ribbon mic, and then if I go to the other mic, which was just a typical condenser, and that was over by the floor tom, so I was kind of picks up more of the high-end information. It doesn't roll off nearly as much as a ribbon mic would. So most of the cymbal information, especially the ride, is coming through that condenser mic. And yeah, this one again, we kind of went through and I pulled up 2.5K on that, and that's just to try to get the snare to poke out more. It's like if I take that out on that one, and I take it out here, notice the snare kind of disappears a little bit.
What if I told you you can have it? What if I told you I don't care? You can be the favorite, I can be second best.
And now we can hear it. It's not, super heavy. It's a pretty poppy song, but it's not a dance track per se. So I'm pretty happy not having, tons and tons and tons of like kick and snare in there. You know what I mean? This is more like, I kind of think of this this style of production as being kind of like, Led Zeppelin 1 or 2, but like way wetter. And there's also no tape machines, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. Should we? So yeah, that was a fun look at just a little bit of the drums. I've got a kind of in automation mode, so you can kind of see, like, we get back to the verse here, and the kick drum. Once again, pulling out 1 and 3.
Too close.
Yeah, I just think that's fun. It's got a great lilt to it. So, should we maybe talk about the bass for a minute? So this is, let me actually grab the bass that we used on this. This thing is my darling. And it's also kind of a piece of shit. It's like a mid-90s made in Mexico Fender J, which has been hacked and cut away on a lot since I got it. When I first got it, the frets were all corroded. So, I got the frets leveled, and I still didn't like it. And I was listening to Jocko at the time, so the frets came out of it, of course. That's what you do. And then here in the past year or so, You know, a new pickup's gone in it. This Chris Novak BSDS. Let's see if we can get that to where you can see that. Yeah. And it's just super passive, very high output. You know, like I would reckon that there are active basses that put out less, you know, output than that pickup. It's pretty insane, especially, you know, with it being in the bridge position. I'm going to show you something kind of fun. The spectral analysis of this track, and you can kind of see, like, by the time you get to 1K, it's just all dropping off there, and there's a little bit of signal noise there up above. Was that like 22 kilohertz, which is pretty far up there, and you know, in the frequency spectrum. But also, if I like solo it, you know, you're not really hearing the signal noise, so I'm not really buggered about that. There are other tracks in here that are actually noisier, which again, I'm kind of okay with. There's just a little bit of yeah, just it kind of gives you a little bit of dirt without having anything actually be distorted, and I kind of like that. But the bass is fairly clean, and if you are hearing any distortion, it's just it's a matter of the color box being set just a little bit on the gainy side for, you know, what I'm trying to. It's still like very, very low gain, but you know, with the output from this pickup, it's actually kind of a challenge to get the gain right to where, you know, it feels and it sounds full, and you're getting a little bit of that like preamp saturation. You know, and by saturation, I don't necessarily mean distortion, but it's just like the little hint of like harmonic distortion that kind of, you know, it kind of gives it a fullness. You know, like people talk about tape saturation. That's kind of what I'm getting at. So yeah, if you're hearing a little distortion, it's coming from the color box. Yeah. So why don't we move on to some Git fiddle. So what I did with this, and again, this is kind of borrowed from some classic records like, you know, Zeppelin. I believe Van Halen 1 did this, was the guitar. If I solo this, it's all the way to one side. All the way. But we know it. And then you've got a reverb track, and this is just a room reverb, the plugin that came with Ardour. And then of course I do a high pass and a low pass after the reverb, and that just kind of cleans it up, make sure the bass has room, because, you know, reverbs can really creep into that frequency space. And yeah, that's known as the Abbey Roads trick. Or Abbey Road Studio was known for doing the high pass and the low pass on reverbs. Let me put this bass away. So yeah, when you you know, put that back into the context of the full track, it does help give everything a little bit of space, because you bring that guitar too close to the center, and it's in a very similar frequency space as the voice, and it's also kind of creeping into the bass a little bit. So you know, taking that guitar and shoving it off to one side kind of helps it exist in its own space, which I think is very helpful. And then you throw the reverb on the other side just so it doesn't feel, you know, the mix doesn't feel lopsided, because it definitely will. Like if I just mute that, I mean, there's other stuff that's going on over on the right side, but this feels a little bit lopsided to me, so I just put the verb back
You
in.
can be the winner of Employee of the
Yeah,
Month.
that, to me, feels better.
I've got other avenues to glow.
All right. And then there's one little, with rhythm guitar, there's one little piece of additive production going on here. And that's just, you know, the second pre-chorus. Celeste had this idea, and we kind of messed around with it, and, you know, it stuck. I didn't want to do too much of this sort of thing with this track, because I'm really interested in trying to capture, like, the live sound of Yeti Set Go, you know, so, you know, too much additive production and all of a sudden just, it sounds like a different band. So, but this worked really well, and I didn't feel like it was adding something that's, you know, gonna be really missing when we play this live. So I'll just kind of solo that out and you can hear that. And there's not a single plug-in on that track. That's just, you know, again, the ribbon mic going into a preamp, going into an 1176, and yeah, it did not need any kind of EQing. Although, you know, in hindsight, maybe I could have like thrown on like a high pass and a low pass, just, you know, taking off some of those extreme edges. It can, you know, that can kind of help clean up a mix. Just getting out any kind of signal noise or anything that you know, might be, you know, taking up space where other things are going to want to sit. But yeah, for this little bit, it didn't really need it, as is evidenced if I just unsolo that and we go back and listen to it.
What if I told you you can have them? I don't need to be the teacher's
The delay trails. Should we maybe before we talk about vocals, I just kind of want to talk about this guitar solo a little bit. It's basically, it was done in two chunks. The first chunk, yeah, it was probably the second or the third take that we did on this, and I thought it was wonderful. It's a little bit on the busy side, but it for me, it ticked all the boxes. And oh, the other thing I was going to say about this is this is using my own little fuzz box that I built. It's basically a copy of a Mark II tone bender with silicon transistors, and I think you'll agree. I think it sounds pretty good. I'm just going to solo that guitar. Yes, I mean, maybe not the cleanest playing you've ever heard, but I think it contributes a lot to the energy and the attitude of this track. Yeah, you go back and look at a lot of like Jimmy Page solos. A lot of them are a little bit messy, and that's why they sound so good. Like if you were to solo them out, you'd be like, yeah, that's messy. Why did you publish that? But then you put it back into context and listen to this.
You can be the prima
Yeah, and like I say, that was done in two chunks. There's the first chunk that goes all the way to where the vocals came back in, and while I kind of like the take that was done there all the way through, we kind of talked about it a little bit as a band and decided that we could make it a little bit less busy and kind of get some more string on string bends in there, because you got a fuzz box on there. Do some string on string bends. It sounds disgusting and amazing. Yeah. I think it's time to talk about vocals just a little bit. So you'll see there's a couple of vocal tracks that are muted. I'm not gonna unmute those right now. Those are in there either for scratch track purposes, or there's a couple of other things that happened in the production process. But the main vocal track, shout out to Paul Abner. He was vocal coaching through this, trying to, and I think we got a really great energy from Celeste when we recorded this. There are places where there's a certain visceralness that I'm pretty proud of, that we got to capture that. So yeah, just let me solo a bit of this. I'm gonna mute some of these delays. I'm gonna just start it here so we can kind of hear that.
You can be the favorite, I can be second best.
There's also a bus on here.
You can be the prima donna of this show.
That's just taking the main vocal track and creating a reverb on it. For the delays, what I did was I actually duplicated the track. I can kind of right click here and duplicate, which I think in the future I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do like a whole bunch of buses, and it kind of gives you a little bit more flexibility if you go back and retrack things. But yeah, no, this worked. So I could basically take these duplicated vocal tracks, and then as you can see, I was messing around with auto-tune at one point in time. It's not on the live track. There's actually no pitch correction on the live track, which again I'm really proud of. And by live I mean the published track. That's what I mean. Yeah, just a little bit of EQ going on there, and then this delay, which I set for 100% wet. Of course, I had to math out what exactly the quarter note was. So you've got a quarter note delay, and that comes in on the pre-chorus. I think that's what this is.
Favorite, I can be.
I'm lying to you. That's the chorus.
What if I told you I don't care?
You might have heard for a moment there was a little bit of signal noise in there, a little bit. This probably came from a cell phone, but again, I'm not particularly bothered that that's in there. You don't really hear it in the full track, and it's just kind of, I guess, puts a little bit of dirt and a little bit of reality into the track. But yeah, so kind of going back to the delays, we've got one that's quarter note delay, and then again I had to math out what the dotted eighth would be. So and the dotted eighth comes in on the chorus, giving us a nice little ping pong effect, and then so I'm gonna unmute those, and here's what
you try so hard to be number one.
So that's the end of the verse.
What if I told you you can have it? What if I told you I don't care?
And here comes the dotted.
You can be the favorite, I can be second best. You can be the prima donna of this show. can be
And
the
our prima donna
winner
has
of
entered the chat.
playing
Not the chat,
in
but
the
actually is live in the room. Hi, Celeste.
Hi.
I've got other avenues to
Want to grab a pair of headphones?
Yeah.
I saw you roll your eyes at me. It's time for me to.
So yeah, then we go into the back into the verse, and we're stripped back down to there's just a little bit of reverb, and I'll just kind of comment on that. I really like a plate reverb for Celeste's voice.
Plug me in.
Okay. So, and if I solo just the reverb, see if this works.
Spill the tea, Regina
Nah, it still has
George
the
only got
original
so far.
vocal in there, but you can probably hear off
I
on
do my
the
work,
right.
'cause I'm no snitch, even when you're acting like a total bitch.
There's that plate reverb. You know, like I say, I think plates sound really good on Celeste's voice. Yeah. And of course, the other thing to kind of look at with this vocal bus is that's actually getting everything. If I go through and look at the Ardour tracks, it's got these two tracks with delays on them, as well as the actual main vocal, are all going through that that reverb, and that's just kind of, in my opinion, helping tie the whole thing together. So if I go back and listen to this chorus,
Can be the favorite, I can be second best. You can be the prima donna of this show. Oh.
yeah, is that not a really wet sound?
It's soaking.
It is soaking. I mean, we live in Seattle, we're used to wet. Yeah, and I like that. The other thing I'll note about that is you may notice over here in the plug-in rack there's a couple of sends for compressors. That's just side chaining for the delays, just trying to duck them out of the way of the main vocal, so that way when the vocal is singing, you know, it's there. And it is a little bit louder than what you would call felt not heard, but it's kind of going in that direction, so that way, you know, and then when the vocals stop, you're going to hear that those delays kind of bloom back out. Just kind of listen to that again.
You can be the favorite, I can be second best.
It's a little subtle. Like I say, it's a little bit wetter than, you know, felt not heard, but you might hear the, you know, just kind of blooming of those delays and the reverb coming up out of, you know, whenever the main vocal stops. And, you know, like I say, I think that just helps fill out a lot of space, and it, especially with as few tracks as there are in this song, because I mean, you look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 tracks. If you're to look at like a Jacob Collier production, you're talking like 200 tracks. Okay, it's kind of bonkers, and that's great. But you know, like I say, what I'm aiming for is like Led Zeppelin 1, but wetter, because we live in Seattle, so it's gonna be wet.
Yep.
And I think I'm kind of running out of things to talk about. You know, like I say, with something this kind of cut and dry, or cut and wet.
Yeah, they're cut and wet.
Yeah, cut and wet, not cut and dry. There's not a whole lot to talk about. I mean, maybe do we want to talk about compression a little bit more? Because I mean, there's not a whole lot of compression. I did do a little master bus compression, so that way that just kind of ties everything together going into the output. That, you know, my experience has been, at least with this DAW, that, you know, the master is always kind of like, if the individual tracks are like getting up close to the edge of their headroom, the master is gonna like go well past that. So a little bit of master compression kind of helps with that, and it ties everything together pretty nicely, I think. So it feels more like a cohesive mix and less like, you know, all these individual things that you kind of just hear individually. Yeah, I mean, quick look at the EQ on the bass. All I did was bring up like 600 a little bit and brought up 300 a little bit. And that's just, you know, trying to get you to where, you know, you can hear this on, you know, like a cell phone speaker. Because, you know, that's like the very bottom of what those things can produce is like 250, 200, somewhere in there. And let's see, I'm going to ignore that track because you're not allowed to hear that track. And then on the vocals, fun fact, I guess there is a little bit more to talk about here. We almost published this with, you know, a lot more stuff on the vocals, and it kind of got to where we were, or by we I mean I was putting more stuff on it, and it was just creating more problems than it was solving. So it's like here in the past couple of days, I like stripped everything down and just started all over again. There used to be like a compressor, it was on high pass filter, a low pass filter, there was EQing out the wazoo, and then I kind of came back and I did this, and all I'm doing is I'm just taking out the very high highs and some of the very low lows and just boosting 2K and 4K just a little bit, and that just kind of helps the voice cut through a little bit. You know, because like the bass, my bass in particular, it seems to, like, anything under 1K, it just walks all over. So you know, like your typical guitar mid-range is like 500 to 900, give or take. And so, you know, you're kind of fighting with the bass on that. And if I were to try to boost those frequencies in the voice, again, it's just gonna like kind of fight with the bass. So and also the guitar too, a little bit, even though the Jazz Master that we used on this is a fairly scoopy sound, you know, again, it's like the voice and the guitar are in a very similar range. So yeah, just bringing out like 2 and 4 a little bit in the voice just kind of helped it cut through, give it a little bit of like the edge it needed, and I think actually kind of amplifies some of the visceral qualities of the vocals that were laid down. I don't know if you tuned in earlier, Celeste, and heard me say that, but I did kind of make a comment about the energy of the vocals, which is, there's a certain like viscerality to it that, you know, I very much felt like needed to not be squashed.
Don't squash me.
Don't squash me, bro.
Yeah, don't squash me, bro.
Compression. Yeah, so that's all there is really to say about that. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Want to look in the comment section real quick?
Well, currently Twitch is empty.
Oh.
I'm using Restream, and that's going to YouTube and Facebook as well. So
Oh,
you might want to grab your own cell phone and see if anybody's commented on Facebook, because
we'll go do that.
I'm not even looking at Facebook.
Okay, I'll go take a look.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. Like I say, just this is super cut and wet. So I'm kind of at a loss for what else to talk about. I think we might go ahead and cut it off there, unless there's a comment on the Facebook with any questions.
Let's see.
I would love it if there were questions coming in from Twitch or what have you. Just kind of things that I can talk about that maybe I haven't touched on just yet. Oh, you know what else I can kind of point out? If I kind of scroll through and look at the guitar here, you might be able to see there are like 2 cuts in the whole track on this rhythm guitar. Yeah, I think that speaks volumes to how well Celeste knows this song, and you know, just how well she plays rhythm guitar, that she just like laid down the whole thing up to here, and the only reason we cut it there was we needed a change in pedals. That was pretty much it. You know, I just didn't want to hear a pedal click. Sorry, Keith Richards. Satisfaction. In the track, and that was all that really came down to. So, is there anything I'm missing you want to hear about Celeste?
No, not that I'm seeing.
Okay. Well, I think we'll call it there. It's, you know, we're only about 45 minutes into it. Usually we try to go for at least an hour, but, you know, like I say, there are things to talk about here, and I can't think of what else to talk about. All right, well, take it easy, guys. We're going to sign out for now, and we'll see you on the next stream whenever we come around to that. I'm going to show you my OBS for just one more second. Hashtag pants down.